The Dad I Wish I Had covers the often overlooked issues of the father-child relationship. Everyone has a father, and many people have been let down by the one they call Dad. The Dad I Wish I Had will aid in learning to forgive, love, and grow in your personal strengths.
If I did nothing, or if I should say it like this, if my children did nothing but walk in my footsteps and do exactly what they've seen me do, not just here, but in my home, where would they end up? Why is gang activity increasing? Why are STDs increasing? Why is premarital sex increasing? Why are all the fruit of what we're seeing going on, why is all that increasing if the tip of the spear is being the tip of the spear?
Freddie Scott II has a history as a player in the National Football League, youth counselor, health advisor, public speaker, and entrepreneur. His most recent research has made him aware of the tremendous need for strong fathers in America's ever-changing culture and across the world. Today, Scott travels throughout the country speaking on such issues as family, finances, health, business, and personal goals. He is an NFL spokesman for All Pro Dad and also the assistant pastor of Word of Faith Christian Center, Nashville. Scott balances all of these responsibilities along with those of being the husband of his beautiful wife, Tonda Linnea, and the proud father of 4 very active sons and 1 adorable daughter.
This journey started for me some time back here at the church, where I was sitting in the back of the sanctuary, and I just clearly heard the Lord speak to me and say, write a book entitled The Dad I Wish I Had. Now, when I heard that, I knew exactly what God meant. Even though I was a second-generation NFL player myself, my dad, Freddie Scott Sr., played 11 years in the NFL, played with the Baltimore Colts and Detroit Lions from 74 to 83, and had a great childhood growing up being a son of an NFL player. In fact, my dad had one of the first NFL Nike contracts, so we used to get free shoes shipped to the house, and he was on posters with some of the greats. In fact, he was just recently inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame with John Elway and Marcus Allen and other great football players from the past. And even though on the field life was great, off the field our family represented what other families could relate with, in the fact that the marriage struggle. And my dad grew up without a dad in his life. And so understanding the real impact that a father has on his children and a husband has on his wife was just something that he didn't have growing up. And like many people can relate with, we had our own challenges. And so when the Lord told me to write the book entitled The Dad I Wish I Had, I knew what he was talking about. Now, the book in no way slams my dad or is disrespectful, because the first commandment says to honor your father and mother, that it can be well with you. So when I got the assignment and I wrote the manuscript, I gave it to my dad first. And I wanted his blessing on it. And as a result, he came back to me and said, thank you for writing this. And it actually helped me to understand my family through my children's eyes. Now, that was something that was really important to me, because it showed me that even though as men and as fathers, even though we may love our families and love our wives and love our children, sometimes we don't see things or see the impact of our decisions the way our children do. And that's one of the things that I'm really excited about with this documentary, is the fact that we're going to be able to address some real issues and be able to see from a gambit of perspectives, from pastors, from community leaders to average teachers or men and women. We're going to be able to see how impacting a man really is, not just in their family, but in the fabric of society around us.
I would say that the number one thing is a feeling that they matter. And, and that goes back to the whole idea of just feeling safe or secure, that they have a place that they can go and feel like they can get away and not be under assault, that they can be who they are, that they can be celebrated for who they are. And it helps to bring to bear that, their choices make a difference. And if they're making choices that are colored by the fact that there are those that are out there cheering for them that will be excited or disappointed by choices that they might make, I think for me that's always been, I feel, a key for these kids to get just that sense of significance, that they matter in this world, and that they do have a team of people that are out there pulling for them. Well, the kids that we serve with Big Brothers, Big Sisters primarily come from single-parent households, and we have far too many young boys in particular that are without a male figure in their lives, and in many respects it's almost a rudderless existence, for some of these kids that don't have a positive example to follow. We mentioned earlier when we were just kind of kicking it around a little bit here that, all of our children that are out there today have mentors. The problem is it's not always the right one, particularly with our young boys. Many of these kids have experienced abandonment or disappointment because, a guy may have started down that road, whether it was their own biological dad that disappeared from the landscape, and so thereby disappointed that person. And so in many respects, those kids, the only control they may have over a relationship is to even try to torpedo it themselves and to test you.
Currently, if you do a search on Google and type in "I hate my dad," you will get over 7 million hits. If you search "I don't know my dad," there are close to 50 million hits. And for those asking the question, "Where is my dad?" it will bring up approximately 39 million hits.
Well, growing up, my story is a little different from most people who live in fatherless household. I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee with just me, my mother, and my 2 siblings. Very hard. I often asked questions about my dad, and the response I got from my mom was not a pleasant one. But unlike most kids who just believe a lot of the things their mom said, for some reason in my heart, my dad could do no wrong. Like, he was a great man somewhere that I didn't know. So that summer, I went to my father's mother's house in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And while living with my grandma that summer, naturally, I met my father. What really upset me with my father is that I was living in the same town as him. I was living in sometimes the same house as him. But the time that I needed as a son, it still wasn't there. This is a young man's cry. Young man's cry. If you listen to it, you'll find out that it is a story. A story directly connected to my story as a young child in the story. I believe it started off saying, you never gonna be nothing. You gonna end up being just like me. And that's, for me, that voice is the voice of my father when he was drinking alcohol. He would say things like that. And also that part when he said that you're gonna be just like me was really a foreshadowing to the end of the story. So I kind of wanted to give like a image of what was set people up with what was gonna happen without them even knowing it. Cause it'll make me cry, cause I didn't wanna think about my D-A-double-D-Y. Yeah. Why should I try when you
I didn't have what you would call a traditional father in the home. I had a stepfather, but he was mostly absent in my life. I didn't have the traditional raising by a father. My mother and my father, because of the situation in my home. As I grew up, I basically grew up independent of male influence. My mother was very active in my life. You know, she's the one that raised me, my grandmother as well. I had a grandfather, but again, he wasn't the best example for me. Well, dealing with that, the way I dealt with it growing up was to actually be very destructive toward myself and sometimes toward others. When my friends and I would go to parties, I stayed with, a Heineken in my hand, stayed with beer in my hand. I experimented with cigarettes and those types of things. And it progressed to not necessarily drugs, but I became addicted to like street racing, driving fast, endangering my life and the lives of others as well as a coping mechanism for that void that was in my life. I began not to care about myself or other people. Things began to change in my life when I was introduced to real relationship with Jesus. I moved from New York to Tennessee. I didn't have any family, any friends down there. I was going just based on wanting to go to a school that would help me learn more about God. And when I got to Tennessee is when my life really changed, because that's when I realized that I can actually live for him and have a relationship with him. He began to talk to me and deal with me and help break down the wall I had against males and men in my life. In the church I was going to here in Tennessee, the senior pastor of the church I was going to in Chattanooga began to mentor actually a group of us, a group of males like myself that didn't have fathers in the home. He kind of took us in and started to groom us and mentor us for ministry. And that's when I really realized that men weren't the enemy, but I could actually have someone in my life that would tell me I'm doing a good job or tell me that I'm actually worth something.
God has a call and a purpose for your life. You don't need to walk around wondering, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? Where am I going? Because God has a clear path. Even if you don't have people in your life that are directing you right now, even if you don't have a father in your life, a mother in your life, God is saying right now to stand up.
Well, since being the youth pastor at Word of Faith, it's helped me realize that even though I didn't have a traditional father in my home to help raise me, I've become a father to many of these young people. And the way I deal with them is how I would have expected a father to deal with me, approaching them with love and with discipline at the same time. There always has to be a balance, a proper balance between love and discipline. When I teach the young people, I teach them from a standpoint of love. I teach them from a standpoint of the guidance that the Word gives and also the discipline that needs to be set in place in order to keep them on the righteous path that God has for them. In essence, I've become something that I didn't have because of the power of God in my life.
Sadly, what I've observed is children, both male and female, who have anger, who feel rejected, who lack confidence. Many of them are ashamed when they're around other peers who have the benefit of having the nurturing and the love of their fathers. Many times there's jealousy, and certainly there's a need to belong, and which oftentimes is filled inappropriately or in a way that's dysfunctional or destructive. And so it can result in gang affiliations, it can identity and identification crises. As a pastor, I get an opportunity to be invited into the lives of many, many people, and understanding now more of the importance of the role of a father and a dad.
you can see just a wide spectrum of deficiencies in lives of people, both males and females, when dads don't understand the tremendous role and the importance of their role in the lives of their family. It's just absolutely essential that there is an awakening and a renaissance in the hearts and minds of men to understand the role that dads play is essential and vital to the proper cultivating of young people, of children, and families as a whole.
According to 72.2% of the U.S. population, fatherlessness is the most significant family or social problem facing America. An estimated 23.6 million children live absent from their biological father. Of students in grades 1 through 12, 39% live in homes absent from their biological fathers. 33% live away from their fathers, as well as 43% of urban teens. Translated, this means that children from fatherless homes are 5 times more likely to commit suicide, 32 times more likely to run away, 20 times more likely to have behavioral disorders, 14 times more likely to commit rape, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 10 times more likely to abuse chemical substances, 9 times more likely to end up in a state-operated institution, 20 times more likely to end up in prison.
For a number of our young black men, I think they really have challenges in managing that. They want to be validated, is what I'm trying to say. The validation is important for anybody. It doesn't matter, black, white, Chinese, Puerto Rican, and I think our young men don't have that while they're young back upstream. And so when they become men, if they haven't gotten proper guidance and mentoring, the quickest way for them to validate themselves is, okay, I'm a dad. Okay, great, you're a dad, but it's one thing to be, it's one thing to be a father. It's another thing to be a dad. And so quite naturally, they don't know how to be a dad. They don't know and understand how to assert themselves.
The many that aren't, and statistically speaking, we know that unfortunately in our community, there are more children being raised in single-parent homes, particularly with the mother being the head of the household, that I do think that creates some issues developmentally in terms of their social adjustments, not having a male presence in the home in terms of an authority figure. Unfortunately, sometimes I think African American males, when they did not grow up with that, not across the board completely, but sometimes they have difficulty responding to authority because they've never, seen it at least in the male context. And if you are, I think, an African American male, whether you're single or married, it's not just the responsibility of you just to take care of your own anymore. And I know that sounds cliche-ish, it takes a village to raise a child, but it's so true. I mean, the reality of that is so true. And it's becoming more and more true when we look statistically at how many basically children are growing up in fatherless homes. Now, either the father, was never present in their lives, or for whatever reason, he's not emotionally present. Whatever the circumstances, somebody's got to fill that gap, and I think, that's where church is very important. I know at my church in particular, I know that we have a lot of males who have tried to do that when they notice that there's a situation where a child, is needing a male figure in their life, a male child or a female child, and there's not one present, where somebody will step in. And I think that that's very important, and I wish that it wasn't just the church that was doing that, because there are a lot of kids out there that parents may not get them to church.
But the economy is not our biggest problem. We have another threat that is threatening our society that's even worse than the economy, and that is the deterioration of our family structure. You are the most influential people in this city. You set the tone in your homes and in your community by your love and your commitment to your family and to your children. You are setting a tone for that teenage boy who doesn't quite really know what a real man is and is considering whether or not he needs to join a gang.
One of the things that this book helped my dad do and myself, as well as other men do, is to understand the impact that our decisions have on our wives and on our children. And so that way, hopefully, we're not causing scars and creating marks that are unnecessary. In fact, I like to say, we're either making a mark or we're leaving a scar. And as a man, we need to understand what I need to do to make sure that I don't leave a scar in the hearts of my family, but I can make a mark that leaves a lasting legacy that I want them to follow afterwards. After I wrote the manuscript, I contacted Jim Caldwell, who is at the time was the assistant head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. He was my receiver coach at Penn State. We started talking and connecting, and from that conversation, he connected me with Tony Dungy. Tony Dungy agreed to read the manuscript and agreed to write the foreword for the book. And from that, I was introduced to his organization, All Pro Dad. And within 7 days of that conversation, I was in Indianapolis, there with Coach Dungy and Coach Caldwell, praying with men and dads all across the country. And since then now, for the past 3 years, I've been a national spokesman for All Pro Dad, traveling around the country, speaking to tens of thousands of men and children across the country to encourage men just to be a better dad and to give men practical tips on how you do that. And it's been really humbling to realize that none of this was on my agenda. I wasn't planning any of this. I didn't have a business plan and saying, hey, I want to write a book. This is simply what God told me to do. And the doors that have opened up have been the things that he wanted to impact specific men and children that he already had in mind when he told me to write the book. From that also, we've had tremendous events, what we call All Pro Dad father and kid experiences, and we just came from one recently here in Nashville, and it was an awesome time of having the opportunity to speak to about 1,500 dads and kids out there and giving them practical tips and addressing issues like childhood obesity or how to leave a lasting legacy and plan and organize your day for your family, or writing love notes to your kids, to something that's tangible, something that when those kids walk away, they know how much you love them and they understand how important they are to you as a dad. Many times as men, we don't understand the impact that we really have in our families and in the community around us. And that's one of the things I love to see at our All Pro Dad events. We're able to see and get a chance to be able to make that mark and not leave a scar. I understand that today we have 40% of children born in America are born to an unwed mother. We also have the 52 to 54% divorce rate. So you're looking at a lot of children growing up without a dad in their home, either when they're born or at some point during their childhood, which means you have a lot of single parent mothers out there who are doing the very best that they can to provide for their children, to be both mom and dad, which I know is a very challenging position to be in. And there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of women that are doing an outstanding job of doing that. And sometimes the men are in their lives because they choose not to be. But then sometimes they're not in their lives because there's issues between him and her that's causing that to happen. And hopefully through this documentary, both the men can see how important they are, then also women will be able to see how important men are, and if it's at all possible to allow that man to be a great dad to those kids, we can open up those doors, because the most important thing is making sure that the kids are getting, for both mom and dad, what they need. And so if that's taking place, if this helps inspire somebody to do that, then I believe that our job is well done.
Clearly, a lot of these things would be curbed if there were men in the house, okay? And, you know, I have some ideas, and I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I can't say why I think part of it may be that for these young men, because we're not born with a legacy, maybe we're not born of a name like a Rockefeller or Vanderbilt or whomever, you know, we want to contribute something. Oh, I can claim that as mine. That's my child.
I really believe that a dad, a man who wills to be the best father figure that he can learn skills that are not natural to himself, or maybe that he didn't have the benefit of having mentored to him in his upbringing, but he can develop, he can learn skills that ultimately will make him a better dad, a better father, a better provider, a better nurturer, and that then can be passed on as his legacy to his children. I'm a firm believer that if you have a willing heart and you're willing to learn and go through the learning curve, you can become an outstanding dad in the eyes of your children and pass that gift on as a legacy to future generations.
Are we going to be the ones that reconnects the disconnect, if you will? And because there's been a disconnect. You know, as we've been, as black men in particular, eliminated from the landscape. You know, fewer and fewer going to college, more and more finding their way into the criminal justice system, and systematically almost being removed from society. There are enough of us that are out there, the so-called talented 10th, to step up and reconnect those dots and return us on to the path that says, all right, this is the legacy that I'm leaving for my kids and my grandkids. Do I want to be able to sit out there on that porch and say, you know what? When the call to action came, I responded.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this documentary. I hope that the information was a blessing to you, was something that made you think, hopefully change your perspective on some things, but most importantly, helped us to understand how important men are in our families and in the communities around us. If you're a dad, we encourage you to be a better dad and to step up to the plate and really do the things that you know you're already empowered to be. If you're not a dad, you can still be a father figure to somebody, and look around you. There is someone, there's a child, there's a young person out there that needs your leadership. They need your character. They need to see your integrity. I encourage you to step up and impact somebody around you. Thank you again so much to everyone that supported this effort. You can order my book, The Dad I Wish I Had, online at thedadIwishIhad.com or anywhere books are sold. I look forward to being able to see how many of you truly transform your family and the people around you. Thank you again for watching.
A father's hands will shelter you. A father's eyes will see right through. And though a father's love was never there for you, somehow you knew just what a father's love was always meant to do. A father's heart will